T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
The best meme I've seen relating to Star Wars Episode 7 was about Luke's new Skywalker. You want to see it? All right, head on up to citizensoftech.com/e/23 for the show notes, and there it will be. Don't care about Star Wars? I think that visiting websites is so 2015. Okay. Welcome to the new year, then. Citizens of Tech arrives in 2016 with new nerdy bits to inspire and amaze you. We have some past, present, and future tech today as we discuss emulators, cassettes, long-distance wireless charging, SpaceX, gene editing, Oculus Rift, and not flying over Antarctica. I am Ethan Banks. You can follow me on Twitter at ECBanks, where I tweet interesting articles on IT, bad puns, my blog posts, and other nerdy bits I think you might like. And standing tall is my co-host, that master of energy, gaming, and trivia, Eric Sutphin.
You can follow me on Twitter at Zutphin with a Z. I also tweet interesting articles on IT, bad puns, my blog posts, and other nerdy bits you might be interested in, as well as the occasional cat picture or nerd humor.
You totally ripped me off, man.
Yeah, I couldn't have written anything better, so I just stole it. Good artists create, great artists steal. Is that what it is?
Something like that. So, Eric, you and I, over the holidays here, we managed to each buy a car. And I guess we kind of both had to balance out the universe.
Yeah, we had to bring balance to the force, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of did the good and evil cars. And to be fair, I guess I'll start. I did the evil car. So I have a reason in my family to have a third car. It's like 3 cars. You're so socially irresponsible, man. You're killing the planet. Yeah, I kind of am. I will admit that. Oh, I'm a Subaru fan. Okay, I have 2 Subarus that I bought new 3 years ago, and I needed the third car because of just the way our family is, and teenagers and people heading to college and blah blah. And I've always wanted a turbo Subaru, but I didn't really want a Rex, the WRX Subarus, because kids tend to own them and they get beat on. And so for me, the ultimate Subaru to get was the sleeper turbocharged Subaru, the Forester. And the era to get the Forester from was back to 2003 to 2005. That's the second gen Forester. The turbocharged engine that they put in there is basically a detuned STI motor that they were putting in the Imprezas back in the day. At least that's what my reading leads me to believe. So, okay, I find one, it's down to Mass, I bring it home, and so on. It gets horrible gas mileage, it requires premium fuel, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, you put your foot in it, and it pulls like a train. And that is not the car you bought at all.
Diametrically opposed, yeah. So we actually downsized from a minivan to a 2012 Prius V wagon. So we had to replace the van. It had some mechanical issues, and we could have fixed them, but it would have been a few $1,000s, and it got terrible mileage and all that. So we went with the Prius, and so it's sort of the antithesis of.
It's good. See, the extra fuel that I'm burning, you're not burning, so it works out. It's balance to the force, exactly.
Does that make me a Skywalker? I don't know.
So what is this thing? Okay, so my car on its best day is going to get 23 miles to the gallon, something like that. What's yours get?
It depends a lot on how you drive it, obviously, but it's EPA rated 44 city, 40 highway.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. On regular pump gas, right? Nothing.
Yeah, on 87.
Yep. I got to put 91 or better in mine. It's just, whatever. I'm a bad. I'm the reason. The global warming, it's my fault. It's me. I'm the guy. All right. Well, Eric, we should move on to the show. I mean, we found a whole bunch of articles here, and starting up, you are the gaming guy. I always stand back in awe at your gaming knowledge, because at some point I got old and stopped playing them as often as I did. Although I finished Portal 2. I did finish Portal 2.
Oh, did you? Awesome.
Finally. But anyway, there is a pretty sweet game emulator from Mac that we read about.
Yeah, and this one took me by surprise, because for the extent of my knowledge of emulators, OS X has been sort of a wasteland. There hasn't been a whole lot of quality emulation software for Macs. There there have been a few, but either they have been poorly supported or bad compatibility, what have you. So OpenEmu for OS X now supports Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, and more. And by more, we mean like a lot more.
Long list.
So this article actually came to us from 9to5mac.com. But yeah, so I'm an emulation nut. I've been using emulators to play classic, everything from Commodore 64 stuff to Atari 2600, Nintendo Entertainment System, all the way up to PlayStation.
It's just Pac-Man, right? You just play Pac-Man on every platform.
Every iteration of Pac-Man ever. Yeah. So OpenEmu just reached version 2.0.1. This is a huge upgrade. OpenEmu is a free multi-platform retro video game emulator, and it supports Atari 5200, 7800, Atari Lynx, which was their portable device, the Bandai Wonder Swan, which I know you had one of those, right? Wait,
that's one that's actually on this list. I don't remember that one at all.
It did not fare well. It debuted in 1999. It was a portable device. It was competing with the Game Boy and the Neo Geo Pocket Color at the time. Then there's the ColecoVision is on this list. The GCE Milton Bradley Vectrix, if you recall that. The Magnavox Odyssey 2 and VidPack Plus. Intellivision, it does NEC's TurboGrafx and PC Engine CD and PCFX. Nintendo Famicom Disk System, Nintendo 64. So the Famicom is the actual Nintendo Entertainment System. In Japan, it was called the Famicom because it's the family computer. So the disk system was only a Japanese thing. They actually would distribute software on disks instead of on cartridges. So then, Nintendo 64. There's the Sega CD, the Sony PlayStation, and the Sony PSP.
And that's the stuff that they just added in version 201.
That's what they just added, yeah.
The old version, or the previous iterations of OpenEmu also already supported Atari VCS/2600, the 2600 that most of us knew about as kids. Either we had one or our friends did.
Yep.
The Game Boy, NES, Genesis, Virtual Boy, Sega Saturn, and then other platforms, including MAME arcade games, which I know got you kind of excited.
Yeah, MAME is it's multiple arcade machine emulator, MAME. And depending on what you can get your hands on for ROMs, MAME will allow you to play arcade cabinet games on your PC, or in this case, on your Mac.
And the catch here is, yes, it provides an emulation environment for all of these systems, but you got to go get the ROMs and supply them.
Correct. And, there are dubious legalities involved in many of those cases.
But I think what I found is it wasn't hard to find stuff.
It's extremely easy to find stuff. Generally, it's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, I owned a physical copy of this, so I don't feel bad, or I can't find a version of this, so I don't feel bad, or just straight up, I found it. You can reason your way through it, but not always clear cut what's okay and what's not okay to download. But it is what it is.
Yeah, since I'm still a Mac guy, I should give that a shot and see what I can find. I mean, just support for MAME is exciting to me, and I should go back there. I once had spent some time building up a MAME ROM collection and had a lot of fun playing a lot of different games. Yeah. A lot of stuff that's fun out there, and of course, Commodore 64 is a fun emulator as well, although I don't know if OpenEmu supports that one, but it's just one that popped in my head as one that I've worked with in the past because I had a C64 as a kid and played Jumpman. That was one of those games I spent a lot of time with. Pretty cool. Well, onward here, some more retro tech. An article from Ars Technica talks about 2015 was an astounding year for one cassette tape factory, and my brain kind of went, what? Because
Wait, what?
yeah, because apparently cassettes aren't dead. I mean, I know vinyl is like hipster retro cool, and you hear about certain artists like, I like the warm sound of vinyl, man, and then talk oohing and eyeing over the latest turntable and so on. And it's featured in certain TV shows, if you're really cool. Like there's a TV show I've watched called Suits, and one of the lawyers has got an office wall filled with vinyl, and he plays this super expensive looking turntable with this really heavy platter, made from, stone or something, and he's, et cetera, et cetera.
It's got a diamond crystal.
And he's playing jazz on it from back in the day on the original vinyl from the 60s, blah, blah, blah. I mean, okay, cool. But cassettes so let me read you some quotes from the article here so you get what this is all about. National Audio Company President Steve Stepp told ours that his Springfield, Missouri company has been seeing a very healthy 20% year-over-year growth in demand for audio cassette tapes for several years, but 2015 was even better. As of the beginning of October, NAC had reported a 31% increase in order volume over the previous year.
Really?
Well, and I guess the deal is here, as I dug into the article a little deeper, they're the only ones left making cassettes pretty much, because as other cassette manufacturers died off, NAC, again, National Audio Company, would buy up their gear. And that's kind of important because no one else is making new gear for people who manufacture cassettes. And another quote here from the article: the company has 50 to 60 different pieces of heavy machinery in reserve that it has purchased through the years, 30 or 40 that they've cannibalized for parts. The President Stepp there told ours. So it's like they're in business because they just bought out everybody else who was dying off, kept all their pieces and parts so that they can keep their own cassette manufacturing running. And so the question that pops into my head is, well, who the heck, even if there's only one company left, National Audio Company, who the heck is buying cassettes? And it turns out there's a few sources here. Indie bands, that's one. Okay, it's trendy, it's cool, like vinyl. The cassette thing is apparently cool too. Yeah. And one of the things I read is that certain bands like the hiss and the warmth, I guess, that brings to the sound. To me, it was something for Dolby to conquer. I mean, who knew that noise on the tape, the natural noise of the tape slowly moving across the magnetic head was a desirable quality, but I guess, so indie bands, that's a source. Blank cassettes, just people who want blanks. Still, there's some demand out there for that. Okay. And some of the modern artists, not even indie bands, but just modern artists, like they issue stuff on vinyl, they want to issue stuff on cassette, and that includes some big name bands you've heard of like Metallica and the Flaming Lips.
Wow.
So
what about teenagers with unrequited crushes that are going to make mixtapes for
I know
the pretty girl in their class?
I mean, I was in that era. Yes, I did make some mixtapes back in the day. I mean, but now they're playlists, right? Playlist. Right. Their name is mixtape.
Yep.
What's
old is new again.
Yeah, I was just shocked by that article. Who knew there was a business model in that? But yeah, they played it smart, and they're growing.
It's crazy. And they're the only game in town because they bought up all the equipment.
And no one else is making the gear. You couldn't get into this business if you wanted to.
Yeah,
it's insane.
I don't know if that's amazing foresight or just dumb luck.
I don't know. Either way, good on you guys at National Audio Company.
Definitely.
Good on you. Well, moving from the past to the future, what do we got, Eric?
So there's a Ukrainian startup that claims to have solved long-range wireless charging.
Electricity through the air?
Transmitting electricity through the air, yeah.
Okay.
So this comes to us via Ars Technica, as many of our articles do. So long-range wireless charging. I hear that and I think of, okay, we're talking like there's going to be this tower in the center of the city and it's going to, power everyone's cell phones and all that. Yeah, not so much. This is electricity, being transmitted through the air, but it's not long distance as I thought of it. We're talking 5 meters here.
Oh.
I mean, that's a longer distance than the charging mat that's on my, bedside table that charges my phone. Sure. But it's still 5 meters. We're not talking hundreds of feet or, 100 meters or whatever.
So, okay, so this sounds a little more like a proof of concept than, viable tech. I'm not sure.
Yes. And then we're going to take it another step and let you know that your phone still has to be in a cradle.
What? Come on. You're not
So-
helping if I still have to put it in a cradle because I do that today.
Right. So, I mean, to be fair, it's the early days of this, right? This is relatively young technology as far as charging phones and other devices. It sort of works like a crystal radio, right? So, a quote from the article says the idea of a crystal radio is simple. With just a coil of copper wire, antenna, capacitor, crystal detector, and high impedance earphones, and no additional power, you can listen to some radio stations, though the sound level is weak. So, what this company is claiming to have done is to have built a different kind of transmitter and receiver so that they can.
So, it's not exactly electricity through the air as much as it is the energy of the radio waves.
The
going
radio
through
waves,
the air
exactly.
Are
Yeah.
able to recharge the battery.
Yeah. So yes, it ends up being electricity, but it's not a huge amount of electricity either at a time. Really, the big thing about this is that the antenna is the breakthrough. They're using shortwave frequencies for the transmission. So again, like you said, it's the radio waves, which usually requires a long wire antenna. So talking about retro technology here, I distinctly remember the stereo in the living room at my house growing up had a long sort of plastic encased wire.
Well, and if you're talking shortwave, I mean, as a kid, I listened to shortwave as a hobby. I had a shortwave receiver, which in Europe, very common, most other parts of the world as well. In U.S., not so much. So it was actually a thing, and I was totally a nerd.
Yeah.
And to listen to those frequencies, the length of the antenna wire has to match. There's a formula for it, but you roughly match the amplitude of the wave you're trying to listen to. And so for those shortwave frequencies, you end up with a very long antenna that could be many feet, depending on what band you're trying to get.
Right.
And so it sounds like if they're broadcasting in that sort of range, which I know they did not specify in the article, they just kind of said shortwave, they did do something really pretty cool with the antenna to pull that off.
Yeah, it's a really clever application of some really old technology in a way, using it for a future-looking solution. They've got this unique antenna that is not this, super long wire. But the real question is this going to fit inside of a mobile phone case at some point, I guess, is the big question that I'm going to pose.
It looks that way from what I understand it. I mean, in the demo in the article made it, that was, part of it. Okay, that the cradle that you stick your phone in, it's got this battery buffer and an antenna.
Yep.
Effectively, that's all it is. I'm assuming some sort of a capacitor that then gets used to actually charge the phone. So the signal comes across, charges the buffer's in the cradle, you dock it, starts to charge your phone, kind of deal. Although you got to wonder, okay, now we're sending all this juice through the air. Isn't this going to boil my insides, cause me cancer, and make my pet's hair fall out? That kind of stuff.
You can only imagine. So a quote to sort of speak to that is, addressing the obvious safety concerns, Chuba said that the transmitter's nominal rating power is 2.5 watts and its maximum output is 5 watts, which is safe for people and animals. We're not talking about hundreds of watts or anything like that. Although when you're talking about radio waves, 2.5 watts and 5 watts is actually a pretty healthy amount of power to be transmitted.
Yeah, it's not bad. I used to work with a low power FM radio station, and that signal broadcast at pretty small. I mean, it was 80 watts maybe, and it covered the entire city of Concord, several square miles with no problem.
Speaking of things traveling through the air.
Yeah. We talked a few weeks ago about Blue Origin and them landing their delivery vehicle and bringing it back to Earth in an automated way, which was kind of a major mathematical feat. Well, SpaceX is there now as well. SpaceX has done what Blue Origin did, although there's some qualifiers to that. We're going to talk about this in a second, but let's get to the story first. SpaceX sends a vehicle into space. They return it to the Earth safely for reuse. quoting, again, another Ars Technica piece. Is this the Ars Technica podcast? I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
So SpaceX did it. On Monday night, the first stage of its Falcon 9 rocket soared into space, separated from the second stage, and then made a guided flight back to a landing site in Florida. The historic flight marked the beginning of the orbital economy by promising a future of dramatically lower launch costs. Because, again, if you get to use the vehicle again, you save, I don't know if it's hundreds of thousands or if it's millions, but it's a big deal. It's
a lot of dollars, yeah.
And then, okay, so now let's bring the Blue Origin piece of this back in. Again, if you're missing some details here, this is not manned. This is a vehicle that, with computer control and software, can land itself vertically, on a dime. It doesn't need a huge runway and all that stuff. That's the big thing here that's happening. And yeah, didn't Blue Origin get there first? And yes, they did. But Eric, as you and I were talking about this, preparing for the show, what SpaceX did was really a lot more impressive, and you found a pretty cool graphic and stuff.
Right after SpaceX completed their landing, Jeff Bezos of Amazon and Blue Origin tweeted, "Welcome to the club," to Elon Musk. And when I saw that, I was just like, really? They blew the club away. Like, they established a new club that you don't really belong to. That's how much more impressive this is. The image that I showed to you, which we have in the show notes, guys, if you're at all interested in this, take a look at it, and it will really break down the difference between what Blue Origin and SpaceX actually achieved. But the Falcon 9 rocket descended from twice the altitude as the New Shepard or Blue Origin vehicle, and about twice the speed at approximately Mach 7.5. It didn't just, go up into
Blue Origin space.
Yeah, Blue Origin barely made it into space and then kind of came straight back down and fired a retro rocket to slow its approach down. It went way up into space.
Yeah, multi-stage rocket.
Second stage took off. Yeah, and then it flew hundreds of kilometers away from the coast before the first stage, then turned around and flew back. So it actually took off, got the second stage into space, and then turned around, flew back, and then proceeded to land. It had 3 additional burn segments in the landing approach.
Yeah, Jeff, can Blue Origin do that?
Yeah, Jeff. Welcome to the club.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, check out the graph because it really gives a good visual. Like, I was reading articles from literal rocket scientists explaining why this was so much more impressive. I was like, oh, yeah, I understand those words, some of them. And then I saw the image and it all kind of clicked. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, yeah, that's why it's so much more impressive. So, yeah, they've both done it, but SpaceX's was far more impressive.
Well, looking a little bit further into the future, the movie Gattaca? If you remember that one from mid-90s, I think, with Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman, the whole thing was genetic manipulation could make you to be a perfect human. Well, we're actually getting there. You can. It's another Ars Technica story. Gene editing tech named Science Magazine's Breakthrough of the Year. Would you like to edit a genome? Well, now you can. Quote the article, CRISPR, CRISPR, all capital letters, is a futuristic technique that can be used to edit and manipulate the DNA of any organism, crops, livestock, even humans. It can allow scientists to control gene expression and selectively turn genes on or off. And, of course, my brain saw that and went, that's pretty cool. Of course, it's going to cost a fortune. Oh. And then apparently it's not that expensive. Again, quoting from ours, CRISPR is not only remarkable for its ability to manipulate the DNA of a targeted organism, it is also remarkable because it is an extremely inexpensive and relatively easy technique to use. In terms of the resources it requires, it could be implemented in almost any microbiology lab worldwide, which again brought Gattaca to my mind. I mean, in a doctor's office, there's a scene in that movie where they're talking about the baby taking a genetic profile. Your child is probably going to have, a heart problem and this issue and this challenge and these other things. Do you want us to fix that? like just like, do you want us to fix that? Like it was nothing. I don't know. Yeah, that kind of thought process. I mean, that's immediately where your brain goes. So it's kind of like, yeah, let's edit out all the bad things and make humans live forever and stuff. Woo, we're here finally. And sort of, but now we got to sort out all the moral stuff, right? One more quote from the piece. The most contentious use of CRISPR is its application to humans. I mean, CRISPR could provide a potential solution for many diseases that are genetically inherited, but researchers would need to consider the ethical implications of genetically altering patients. They would also need to consider the ethical implications of failing to use genetic modification if it has the potential to save a life. So, you can look at it from the one side, you're messing with, what you are as a human, and that's bad. And on the other side is you're messing with this person's right to a long life by not fixing what's broken in them. And so there's challenges either way.
Wow. Yeah. It becomes two sides of a really interesting debate for sure. Interesting piece of trivia. If you did not know about Gattaca, Gattaca is spelled Gattaca, and it's all those are all letters used to label the nucleotide bases for DNA.
And if I wanted to view a DNA molecule in 3D, I'd probably do it with Oculus Rift because it's finally showing up in market and stuff, and it's awesome. And however, you didn't think it would be cheap, did you?
Because it ain't.
What you find?
So they released pricing for this. You can actually pre-order it at this point. And the problem is they didn't set expectations very well along the way. There have been 2 dev kits for the Oculus Rift. If you're not familiar with that, we've spoken about it a couple of times, but the Oculus Rift is a head-mounted VR system that's been in development for a few years. So the 2 dev kits have been in the $300 to $350 range. And for a long time, the company was saying, yeah, the consumer version of it will be in that $350 range, except it's not. It's actually listed for $599, which that's slightly more expensive. And granted, it comes with like an Xbox 360 controller and some other stuff. But
yeah, but $600. I mean, and you still gotta. That's not a gaming system. It's a viewing system. You still have to hook it up to something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's here's where it gets even more expensive. So you buy your $600 headset, and then maybe more hundreds of dollars for a touch controller that's coming out in a few months if you want the full experience. And then you need a system to run it. So you need a PC, a gaming PC. And so, I'm a PC gamer, and I have a decent computer. It has a slightly aged video card at this point. There's no way it will run it. I knew that well before they announced the specs. But the announced specs were far in excess of what most people thought. It's estimated that less than 15% of the existing PC configurations can run it. It requires, at minimum, a video card that it's the NVIDIA GTX 970 is the minimum spec that they list on their site. And the GTX 970, as of this morning, is $300.
And that's the low-end one that you don't want.
Right. The top-of-the-line card is anywhere from, depending on how top of the line, but if you want the best card on the market, you're looking at $1,000 to $1,500 for the video card. Just for the video card, not the whole PC.
Not the rig, right, just the card. Oh, boy.
So,
and what about the games? I mean, do you need a special Oculus Rift game, or is it going to make any of your 3D games just be amazing?
It's one of those things where it's going to be better when a game has specifically been developed for use with the Oculus Rift. With that said, almost any first-person shooter out there or other 3D game, honestly, is capable of either being patched or already supports this sort of presentation. But it's always going to be better for a game or other piece of software, I should say, that has been specifically built for the Oculus Rift. It should be noted that, for instance, the Samsung Gear VR, which we mentioned briefly a few episodes back, about 60% of their content is interactive experiences and movies. It's not even all about the games necessarily. So the content,
it's more about immersion into some environment.
Yep. of whatever type. So, like you had said at the top of this bit here, is viewing the DNA. There are actually applications that could make use of that. So it's not just about games, but the biggest problem with it is that it was touted as the consumer level, inexpensive, burgeoning new frontier of virtual reality, and now it's not so much the inexpensive. I think they are still on the cutting edge, and it's it's definitely at least part of the future of interactive.
At that price level, though, it's one of those things where it's going to come to market. A few people are going to get it. It's going to be really cool, and eventually adoption will drive prices down, or at least you can hope that.
Economy of scales will come into factor.
Eric, I learned something today. So here's something that came across my Twitter feed by a friend of mine, Mr. Stephen Foskett, and this question was posed on Quora: why are there no commercial flights that fly over Antarctica? Not to it necessarily, but over it, because isn't it closer or faster to get some places if you go over certain parts of the globe? And logically, wouldn't Antarctica be part of that? And Stephen, my friend, answered this question thusly: number one, well, there are no commercial flights that fly over Antarctica due to geography, because frankly, it actually isn't the shortest path if you look at where flights are flying to and from different cities and so on. It just so happens that Antarctica is not in the flight path. That's one thing. Two, ETOPS. There are some rules that ETOPS hands down here. ETOPS governs how far certain planes can travel considering the number of engines that they have. So a 2-engine plane, no go to Antarctica. A 4-engine plane, yeah, that would work if there were somewhere in Antarctica that enough people to fill a 4-engine plane might actually need to go. And if you know much about Antarctica, I've done a bit of reading here and there. There ain't much. It's all science is all that's down there. Very small. It's a very inhospitable place. So anyway, third reason, if you wanted to fly that far south, you have got to prepare the plane extra special. There's rules about that. For example, Stephen says there are special survival equipment for planes if you're going to go below 72 degrees latitude. Meaning if you crash this thing in the cold, you got to have certain stuff on the plane so that people don't die.
assuming they don't die on impact.
Assuming you do, whatever that guy was that landed the plane in the Hudson River. If you pull one of those off, in the below the 72 degree latitude line, and it's awfully frigid, there's special stuff you got to have in order to make that happen. Who and what commercial airline is going to make that sort of an investment? We'll just fly above and burn a little extra fuel. It'll be fine.
Fly against the rotation.
Well, that
of the
wraps
Earth
up
and
episode 23
anyway,
of Citizens of Tech. You can follow the show at
Details.
Citizens of Tech on Twitter, and you can find us on Facebook. Also, visit citizensoftech.com for this and all of our prior episodes. And just remember, if you were abandoned on a desert planet as a child, they're totally not coming back for you. Suck it up, kid.